Fantastic tones for human bones.
Welcome to Fantastic Tones for Human Bones. I am Robert Woods-Ledoux. Mark Pascucci Clifford is in the house.
Check.
Yeah.
Hello.
Cool. Also in the house, we have Devin Smith.
Hello.
Who's doing a little bit of a podcast takeover, whatever.
This morning I was thinking about it, and I think I'm going to refer to myself as the sports correspondent.
Okay. Official FT4HB sports correspondent Devin Smith in the house. And a special guest we are speaking with here is Max Judelson.
Hello.
Max.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah. Max, you are a bass player, an accomplished bass player, even a cello player. And you also race bikes. You're an athlete.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And I believe what we would like to pick your brain about this morning is the relationship between the two things in your life that you do so much. Now, you guys don't know, but Max is about to go on an extended trip where he's got his car packed with like his bass and his cello and two bikes, and he's going to the East Coast to race, and he's playing music in the Bay Area.
Yeah, it's a double tour.
Yeah.
Tour times deux.
Which car is this? Just out of curiosity, so I can fully visualize everything.
It's the old CRV, the same car.
old blue boy. Okay.
Same one I've had for a while. But yeah, I have two bikes and I have 8 wheels for them all. Because yeah, and then
I hope everyone's imagining an 8-wheeled bike.
Yeah, I was gonna yeah, and then I have like some flight cases also in the car to put the bikes in to go on the airplane and all that stuff, and then all the like warm weather gear to race bikes in the cold. It's loaded, fully loaded.
Awesome.
Yeah, so take it away, Devin.
All right. So we met playing in Bob's unusual metal band Onkos, and at that point, we were sitting around chatting, and I had either just started to get into triathlon stuff or was thinking about doing that later, and we got on the topic of cyclocross, and you had mentioned that you'd just gotten back from doing a tour in Europe, and at that point I had no idea what cyclocross is, and if you wouldn't mind just sort of describing what the sport is.
Yeah, sure. So it was invented by the French military. This is my understanding of it. It was invented by the French military post World War I, or like around the early 20th century, as like training for their bicycle messengers. Because at the time bicycles were quite new technology, and it was like a real big deal thing, and they could move a lot of people really quickly, and you could get anywhere. But you also needed to, traverse the muddy fields of northern France and Belgium. And you had to like get on and off your bike, and you had to get around all these obstacles and whatnot. And so they like created this game or whatever, like training exercise. And then I don't know when it's really like became a full on, like sanctioned sport. But it's been quite popular in Europe for a long time. And then it's like really gaining a lot of momentum here. But basically, it's an hour-long race. You do laps for an hour. The laps are anywhere from like 6 to 8 to sometimes longer minutes long. And they like launch you all at once, and you all just like are battling and like running around, and it's often muddy and snowy, and sometimes there's sand, and there's like steep hills and stairways, and you have to get on and off your bike and run with it sometimes. And then you're like, do a couple laps, and you don't know at the onset of the race how many laps you're going to do. You just know it's going to be close to an hour, under or over. And then so if your first few laps are really fast, then they divide that into an hour, and then they'll tell you got 10 laps to go or something. And then you start seeing the countdown.
Oh, whoa.
Yeah. So there's like a little bit of mystery. But you know that it's going to be under or over an hour. And sometimes sometimes they'll do the calculation based on the first few laps, and they might be really fast. And then it goes way over an hour.
That's such an interesting way to do that.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then it's, first person over the line wins, obviously. And everyone else is.
Do they calculate the lap based on like the lead?
Yeah.
Okay, so whoever's leading in the first lap, then that becomes the length of the race.
Mm-hmm. And they'll take at least 2 or sometimes 3 laps and then average them, and then divide the average into an hour.
Oh,
so you might do 2 or 3 laps before you know how many more laps are remaining.
Oh, and that's wild.
And it can be like quite demoralizing when you're like really hustling, and you're like feeling good, and then you start to like fade a little bit, and it's like 20 minutes in or something, and then you see like 7 to go, and you're like, no, I have to do that 7 more times.
And the fact that it's based on the leaders, so all the people in the middle or the back of the pack are like, they have to deal with what the front runners can handle.
Yeah. And then sometimes they'll pull racers sometimes if you're going to get lapped. Other times they'll leave them out there and you just
pull.
Yeah.
Like, so you get preemptively canceled, huh?
Yeah. You still get placed though. Like your placing counts.
Dead last.
Yeah. That is this is a winner's sport, I guess.
Yeah. Does that just sort of paint the picture?
Absolutely. I have a few technical questions here. So
we lost your audio. We can't hear you right now. We're back.
Yeah.
Questions.
So is the order that people go in, is that determined by some kind of like a time trial lap, or is it based on your like point ranking that you have in the standings? Or
yes, it's based on like a points ranking system, and faster people who have better results start in the front of the group.
Yeah.
And they depends on the race, but like the like big sanctioned races, you start 8 wide, so the rows of 8, and then and they call you up based on your rankings, whether it be like international rankings or your US rankings, or how many friends you have who are organizing the race.
Yeah. How many racers are there?
It varies, but it depends. They'll range anywhere from very few to like 80.
Whoa.
The single speed national championships have been over 100 people recently.
Whoa.
But that's because there's a lot of interest in it, and anyone can race, and you don't need to qualify. And so people wear costumes and they go crazy.
So the width of the tracks, there's obviously in cycle racing, there's like an ideal line that you generally want to take. So you're talking about 80 or 100 people all starting at once. So in the first few laps, I'm assuming that there's some kind of technique involved in like elbowing your way through the passing and all that. Is there like an etiquette or like a technique to that?
Is there an etiquette to kicking people in their shit?
Yeah, so the first few turns are usually quite competitive. I mean, the first lap generally, but the first few turns in particular are quite competitive, where people are trying to like either make up a bunch of spots because they think that they didn't get a good enough starting position, or they got a really good one and they're trying not to lose it. And so yeah, you're going like 80 wide, you're going 80 deep, and 10 wide into these like pretty, sometimes very technical early turns. And so, yeah, a lot of it is just like making sure that the people around you don't wipe out. There's like not so much of the elbows, but there's a little like physical contact for sure. But mostly people are just trying to get around them safely. I will say when I was racing in Europe, and some of the races are combined, like elite and the under 23-year-olds. And so those fields get pretty big. There was like 60 to 80 racers in those. And then also racing with all these under 23-year-olds who like have no fear. And, you know, their parents are cooking them dinner and doing their laundry, and they just go full send into it. And it's a little bit dangerous for sure. I feel like the racing in general in Europe and on the professional circuit there is much more aggressive and physical because it's a real deal event, and people spend their lives doing that and like make a career of it.
Man, I still can't get over what you said earlier, that like this came out of World War I. Like I'm just trying to imagine all these like Ypres and all these battlefields just with people on bikes, like just going for it around there. They're like, we got to practice. Let's take a break. Anyway, but yeah, this did come up in Europe. So as that's where the pedigree is, I guess, you know, and imagining like racing with young men like that scares me. Is there you know, having done many performances, some of them more high stakes than others, what do you do psychologically to prepare for races? And I think that, yeah, I'm sure this is a huge topic, but I'm curious about that.
Yeah, well, recently I have had a string of crashes over the last like few years that were unrelated to cyclocross. But that were related to riding bikes. And I do feel like I am like sort of turning the page on my body a little bit to you know, whereas like in this next like block of racing that I'm going to do now, and then going to national championships and stuff, definitely considering, you know, the start as more of a place where I'm just going to try to hold on to what I have, whatever standing I have, and then working more in like trying to pull negative splits on my laps throughout the rest of the race. And so as the race gets more spread out and people get more tired, that I can just make up spots later on, as opposed to trying to get after it in the first lap and like get up into the lead group or whatever. Treating it more as a time trial and less of a group event. Because in recent years also I've started racing track bikes, and I feel like I've come into a different understanding of like what my body's capable of and what it means to race with other people. Whereas with track cycling and road cycling, it's really important to be with other people because you have a group energy that's much stronger than the individual, right? With the way that like drafting and wind resistance and all that stuff works. Mm-hmm. With cyclocross, it's much slower speeds in general, and so that's not as much a factor. It definitely plays a part sometimes, but as you're racing in these like just these weird tracks with oftentimes bad weather and all this stuff, it really just comes into like you just have to be focused and, you know, work on riding a clean lap and pedaling hard when it's time, you know. So treating it more as a time trial and less of a group event, I think is kind of how I'm going at this now that I'm like aging and my body's feeling that a little bit now.
But you're currently what, second in this United States or something, right?
Last year I finished second in the single speed national championships. So there's several there. You can race single speed bikes. You can race bikes with gears on them. In the elite rankings in the country, I don't know exactly where I am, but over the last like 5 or 6 years, I've been in the top like 30 in the country. And it's like come and gone a little bit. When I was racing internationally, your rankings get more like powered up because you're racing with the better people.
Mm-hmm.
But didn't mean that I was necessarily like faster than I am now. It just meant that like the circumstances of the racing that I was doing, it turned out that I had better standings.
Yeah.
But yeah, I am reigning second place single speed racer. And that is a big goal of mine this year. I'm hungry for that title of single speed national champ. I've been close over the last few years. I've had several like podiums in that event, and me and a couple of other guys are really gonna go for it.
Cool.
Mm-hmm.
So like when you're doing the racing, you have like teammates, but you guys are all individually racing. Is that right?
Yeah, it's not so much a team sport as road cycling is in particular.
But you do have, so like in theory, like you could have a teammate, you could be like racing against your teammates.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
You could also work with them to gang up on other people, which is totally a thing. And where, if you have several teammates in the group with you,
yeah,
you can, one of your teammates can take off, and the only person, it's the same tactics that are relevant in road racing, but like you as the teammate of that person you have no responsibility to chase them down. It's up to the other guy or the other racer to chase that person down. So, so you can, that's sort of like a pretty classic team tactics maneuver, is like, if there's two of you versus one other, then you send one of you out, and then wait for your rival to chase that person down. And then when they do, then the other teammate goes.
But what does that mean? Like chase them down, just like follow behind them?
Yeah.
What effect does that have on the person they're chasing?
Well, when you ride in a group together, you can conserve energy. And then if you let someone get far away, sometimes it's hard to like close that gap later on.
Yeah, this might be good to give some context on what drafting is.
Yes. So it's like what birds do when they fly in a flock. Or whatever you call a group of birds, depending on what kind of birds they are.
Yeah.
But the person in the front is breaking the wind or the air, and so it's more work for the person in the front than it is the person behind. There's a slipstream that is like almost like a vacuum, and you can conserve a lot of energy when you're in that slipstream. And so if you're in a group with riders, sometimes people don't want to be on the front. And so they'll like try to pull off because they're working harder, and they'll try to pull off, and then everybody will just like follow them around. And then sometimes they get a little upset when no one wants to take the lead. But so that's sort of what the drafting tactics are. With cyclocross, it's a little bit slower speed sport, so it's not so crucial as it is with track or road cycling, or like car racing is a big deal. Drafting is a big deal because you can conserve a lot of fuel, and then you don't have to like stop as often for fuel, and so it's all the same kind of physics.
Huh.
Yeah, you're being pulled along, it looks like, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the slipstream, the vacuum is quite a real effect.
I'm just gonna drive like that from now on.
Yeah. Do that?
Not to my knowledge, but with running, there is psychological benefits to sort of going in a group, particularly in distance events where your paces may be like very close. So like your lap is maybe only like a second or two behind someone. If you're running next to someone who's going just a little bit faster than you, oftentimes you can get to where they're at using the power of the mind. But I don't think people go quite fast enough to get that same wind braking.
I think it's like under 12. It's over 12 miles an hour. Then those physics lessons start to take bigger effect. I think that's the number.
Yeah, and there's this is a giant aside, but in road racing, there's also really fun drama stuff around both the team aspect and the drafting parts, where you get these break-off groups where the leaders will go, and it's like an uneasy alliance between people from different teams, but they all have to get in the stack and draft together, and they have to take turns, but they're only in it for the drafting, and they're all sort of making mental calculations as to whether or not they can like get the jump on the other guys and like break off from the break-off group and all that stuff.
Huh.
Yeah, it is an interesting, like, you do need to work with your you need to make alliances with your rivals in order to beat your other rivals. So,
Like, you all know that eventually those alliances are going to break. This is awesome.
Oh.
I need to check this out more. You know, it sounds. But just being aware of that would be the difficult thing for me. But
Yeah, like you got to be ready to throw them under the bus, you know.
are you all good over there?
I missed what you said though, Mark.
Oh, I see. No, I just wasn't aware of like the fact that like there was high tension. Well, it's not. I guess it's not high tension. It's just that you all know that at some point you're gonna break these alliances, right? This is very much like a war, a nice little war. So I would like to watch this more and try to be aware of how it's happening. But
Mhm.
So, how did you get into all this racing business?
I got into racing bikes when I was 12 or 13, maybe 14, maybe. But pretty much from quite an early age, I was just when I started riding bikes, I was very excited about it, and I was just that was like something that was just like really the feeling of it, the like experience of it, the independence that it gave me as a young child was like just so wonderful. And so I feel like from a pretty early age, I was just excited about like going faster and like trying rowdy things on my bike. And then I wanted to get into BMX racing, which is a different thing. And there you have to go to a particular track for that and all that. And the track wasn't especially close to where I was growing up. And my parents said, definitely not. That's not happening. Definitely not. And then, so I kind of put that to rest. And then I found that there was some mountain bike racing that was not so far from where I was growing up. And my parents were supportive enough to say, well, if you figure out what you need to do in order to get involved and you pay your entry fees, and we'll take you there. And then for them, it was cool because they could just go on a hike and see me in a couple hours. That was sort of their tactic was, oh, sure, we'll drive you there and we'll go on a hike and tell us how the race went afterwards when we're driving home. They weren't the sports parents that some parents are. So that was a lot of how it happened. And then I did quite well as a young person in mountain bike racing in New York. I was New York State champ in 2001.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Killer.
In under 18-year-olds, and I was like 15 or something.
Wow.
Yeah, it was serious. And that's kind of how it started. I like progressed through the sport a little bit, and then I went to I think it was national championships as an under 18-year-old, and I had never seen the real big dog racers with all their big dog parents. And I was just not into it. I didn't have that type of support. I didn't have that type of like energy and competitiveness. And I went to national championships, and then I quit racing for probably like 10 or so years.
This is I'd like to go back to what you just said a little bit because this is I feel like I've experienced this, not on competitive sports, but just when you say big dog parents, can you just reiterate or not reiterate, just describe a little bit more what you mean by that, like the vibe that you're trying to evoke with this?
Yeah, I mean, parents who are living vicariously through their children, who are pushing their kids to be what they think they should be, or, how they wish they were, whether that be when they were young or, whether that be now that they're, parents. That was a lot of it, I think.
Okay.
Yeah, and my parents were never that way. My parents were very supportive of me through all of these things, through bike racing and through music and, whatever all else. But they never, and I'm very grateful for how relaxed and open they are and have been, with all of those interests.
Cool. Yeah, I think I see what you're saying, but sorry. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
The big dog parents probably provide more financial support.
Also financial support. And I mean, it's, the encouragement that you get from your support team goes a long way. And if you're doing it to please versus doing it for fun, there's different, outcomes. And psychologically, it can have a really big effect on you. Like you can get really, damaged from those things.
Yeah.
And I feel like, for me as now as I am sort of like aging through the sport now, and I feel like I am sort of like aging up out of the like elite racing age. I still feel like I have a pretty healthy relationship with it. I'm excited to, push back from it in the next couple of years and continue riding bikes for sure and racing casually. But as far as, racing on the professional circuit and, traveling for racing and really like the time commitment, I feel like I'm ready and excited to push back on that. And I don't have some of the baggage that I think that some people do have when they've been doing it for different reasons.
You came to the show for the right reasons.
Yeah.
So when you were young, were you also playing bass?
Yeah. I started my early music. I started on cello. Cello was my first instrument.
Okay.
And then I started taking bass a few years later, upright lessons. And then I started, so cello, upright, and then I started playing electric a little bit later on. And then only in the last like maybe 5 or 6 years have I really gotten more interested and excited about electric bass.
Right on. So just in high school, you were doing basically writing and music at the same time?
Yeah, well, so later on in high school, I sort of pushed back from bike racing because I got a little turned off from the scene.
Mm-hmm.
But I was riding a lot. I was riding mountain bikes, and then I just wasn't racing so much through high school and college.
Yeah.
And then after graduating in Boston, there's quite a cyclocross scene in New England, and I was like, oh, I've done that before, and that would be like a fun thing to try again. And then it just like got really out of hand because I was still pretty good at it, and I just like jumped right back in and now we're here. I was never really intending for it to like get this serious again. Yeah.
Yeah. In preparation for this, because we had that one conversation and I was thinking about this music and athletics connection. So I was like, oh, I want to talk to Max about this. And in preparation for this interview, I was like, Googling you and that kind of stuff. And your cyclocross results page came up, and I was like looking at this, and your first year was just like absurd. Like the number of races that you did in like 2013 is just looking at that, my legs start to hurt.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think my first year back was 2012, and then from 2013 to like 17, 18, I was doing like 20 or so races a season. 20 or so races like within a span of a couple of months.
Is there
Yeah,
more?
that's absurd.
No, but for cyclocross, it's basically September through. World Championships are in February.
So you're just like going race.
Yeah, or twice every weekend. There's certain times of year where there's more racing depending on where you are. But in Europe around the holidays, there's 10 races in 2 weeks or something, like professional series races.
Well,
Can't hang.
Yeah. So what is the training schedule like then? And what do you do between races? And I've talked to you in the past about just like you basically cannot consume enough calories, right? to uphold what your training regimen is. But can you talk about just what that looks like a little bit and feels like?
Yeah. Well, yeah. So over the last few years, I've been working more with a much more focused and scheduled training routine. It's been working with a coach, and that has been really helpful as far as my time management goes.
So you have not worked with a coach prior to this?
Correct. Yeah.
You've just been going for it.
Yeah, like self-coached, and this coach that I'm working with now, we've been friends for a long time, and we've like chatted about like ways to get better, but only in the last like 2 years, or this may be our third year. I think this is our second year of really working like towards events and like with more of like peaks and training for certain times. So, and that's been very helpful as far as like time management, because you can work very efficiently in that way, which then gives me more time to work and practice and listen to music and relax and eat and all those things. And so that's been very helpful. Like doing some strength workouts, doing 2 or so strength workouts every week, which are off the bike, and then training on the bike between like 6 and 8 hours a week. And some people train way more than that. And when I was living in the Bay Area, especially early on in my time there, I was like just amazed at how good the riding was, and I just couldn't get enough of it. And so I was just riding all the time.
Would you like go up to Marin, or were you just around in Berkeley, Tilden, Sibley? Where would you ride in the Bay?
Yeah, all over the East Bay, and then ride mountain bikes in Marin, and also in on the peninsula in the Corte Madera. There's great mountain biking there.
Yeah, I know that I've met a fair amount of people who have moved to the Bay just because they can bike all over the place, and both mountain biking and road biking, like especially in like Santa Rosa, Sonoma, like road biking is huge there, and I've done it a few times, and it's just the best.
Now, do you listen to synth retro wave when you're biking? Because it's a training sequence,
I don't.
Because you're basically a montage, you need to.
I don't really listen to much music or anything when I am riding. You can't really hear anything, and also when you're riding out in the world, I think it's a little bit dangerous to be listening to things in such like a close format.
Right on.
And oftentimes in races, also you're not allowed to have headphones in, so it's good to practice without them.
I have been using a trainer recently, so riding like stationary in my kitchen, and I listen to books on tape.
Oh,
yeah.
Oh, what are you listening to?
Right now I'm listening to Fledgling by Octavia Butler.
Oh yeah.
Halloween Empires.
I actually just purchased that book.
It's great. Yeah, I'm also reading. I'm reading it and listening to it sometimes at the same time.
I love Octavia Butler.
Yeah, I only got into her writing over the last 2 years or so. but yeah, getting into it now. Yeah, with that book, and also Parable of the Sower and Kindred. Both of those, Parable of the Sower and Kindred, there's some great graphic novel adaptations of those books.
Oh, really?
I could definitely see that with Kindred. That's like it's like very cut and dry and visual, just like the time back and forth. So I'd love to see that. That's cool.
Those are the 3 Octavia Butler books I haven't read.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Which ones have you read?
So I did the whole Pattern Master series. I forget what that one's called, but it has like the Pattern Master at the end of it, and then Lilith's Brood.
Cool. I love her writing.
Yeah.
And I never was really into that sort of like sci-fi, I guess what they call it, futurism. And I just, mostly with Parable of the Sower was the first one that I read.
Right on.
And I was psyched about that.
Yeah, I mean, she's definitely got her own flavor of that world, but I'll yell at you about sci-fi all day if you give me the chance.
Yeah.
So have you found that there is crosstalk between the way that you approach athletic training and the way that you approach your instrument, particularly when you have to be fielding new or unexpected kind of material, like stuff that forces you to stretch in a particular way with your skill set?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of similarities, in particular with kind of improvised music and with cyclocross. In particular, in cyclocross, with the weather and the terrain, the course can often be changing from lap to lap, and so you might have like a really good line at something, one time through, and then the next time through, it's totally different. And with improvised music and playing in ensembles with other improvisers, you just have to be so ready and open to hear what other people are bringing and respond and react, and offer your own ideas. And so I think that in that way, those things are very related, and that my skill set and background in these two things very much complement each other. I feel like in my training, my personal training of athletics and personal practice as a musician, I feel like there's also some similarities where you have, as a cyclist, you have like you're pedaling, right? That's like the thing that you're doing, and you're pedaling. Your RPMs are high, right? And so over the amount of over an hour, if you're riding your bike and you're averaging like 80 RPMs, right, for an hour, you could do the math, but that's like a lot of pedal strokes, right? It's like many reps. So similarly, like when I'm practicing upright or something, or and I just doing long tones and bow changes, right? You get a lot of reps of bow changes if you're just doing that. And so I think that those kind of like small in technical foundational like aspects of those two things, I think complement or are very similar, and neurologically as well, where you just like, I just going to work on this very simple thing and it's going to make me much better.
That's completely wild. So your upright bass is a physically large instrument. So when you're on it, you really kind of are activating your whole body, as opposed to some instruments are a little bit more focused on just the hands or something like that. Have you found that there are connections between things that you discover in the body on the track that translate to playing the bass, or vice versa?
Yeah, I mean, recently I've just been really trying to protect my hands and elbows and my shoulders. I feel like those are things that are very, I have had some sort of injuries and pain related to upright bass in those areas, my elbows and shoulders in particular. And I've been noticing that those areas are also very hot in the cycling world. Meaning, like, if it's a very bumpy, rowdy course, your hands and elbows can get really sore.
They're taking a lot of the impact.
Mm-hmm.
Mm.
So I think those are the sort of the similarities that I'm finding. I mean, I think that just being a healthy and physical person really helps your general outlook. And as musicians, I think a lot of times our schedules and our sort of the hustle can really, shorten your life in a lot of ways. And I'm excited, and I'm like really happy about how healthy I'm able to stay. And that I think that, being a physically active person and training my body in a very specific and focused ways, I think has helped me just stay healthy and play regularly and have like a bright side when I wake up in the morning.
Keeps you on the right side of the bed.
Exactly.
So you are primarily like a performer on your instrument, would you say? But you've been getting into composition recently?
Yeah. I mean, recently, since the pandemic, I started recording my own music, and that wasn't a thing that I ever really did before. I feel like when I was in college, before that, I was writing a good bit for the band, several bands that I was in at the time. But then, yeah, since graduating and like trying to work as a musician, I'm mostly considering myself like a performer or a side man or that sort of thing. But yeah, then during the pandemic, I was really hungry to be doing more with people. And then some of the opportunities, like I've been accompanying dance for a long time, and then some of those dance classes went online. And so just in order to do that work and get paid and stay connected with those communities, I had to get, a mic and an interface and a recording software. And then I was like, wait, I could just press record. Because
That's how it starts.
Yeah.
we were broadcasting classes on Zoom, and I was just, playing improvised cello loop music, and I was playing it through all that software and everything. And then I could just record it, and I ended up coming up with like a lot of material that way. And then, I put some of it out on SoundCloud. And some of it, it was very early in my experience as producing music and like taking what I do as as an improviser and recording it. So some of it isn't really I don't think sounds especially great as far as like the production aspect of it, but some cool music that I generated and recorded during that time.
Can we listen to some of this?
Yeah. So some of that like early
There's a lot.
Yeah.
I thought SoundCloud limited you to 10 tracks or something.
Not if you pay for some subscription.
Oh.
Yeah.
And
that's how I've been releasing all of my music. So
what's a cool thing to check out here?
Cool. Well, a recent project that I did with Jordan Glenn, who's been on this show before.
Yes.
Ew.
Is this one. You can try I don't know, that first one. The
mini moments?
Yeah, well this one.
This one?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Semi bitter FM 2.
Yeah, try that out.
Whoa. What is going on? So that was
That's
that
awesome,
for
man.
a dance piece?
Yeah. Yeah, that was a collaboration that we did like remotely over this summer for a dance piece for Sharp and Fine.
Right on.
Mhm.
Cool.
Yeah. So there's several nuggets from that
So
show.
what
Were you both writing?
Yeah, it was a cool collaboration with Jordan. We had sort of shared a few things back and forth prior to any of this that then got into the show. Yeah, we were both writing. That particular one was something that I had sort of been working on for a while, and then he played the marimba parts and the bowed vibes. Couple of the other ones, he sent me vibes thing,
Mhm.
and then I wrote some string parts on them, and then one of the pieces is just percussion solo. But yeah, we were both writing collaboratively in that kind of way where I would send him something and could you do this on it, and then he would send me something and maybe you could play some strings on it. It was quite open in that way.
How was it when you were working with Sharp and Fine? Like, I'm assuming there's some bit that this goes with, right?
There is a bit like of dance.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, in that way that I've worked with them several times and worked with other dancers a good bit over the years, and they were pretty open and they knew kind of what my music is like and kind of what Jordan does sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
And they sort of just gave us some loose, attitudes and like sentiments and textures, and guidelines time wise for that of like, we need this piece is going to be 12 minutes long and we're going to have several sections. So each thing can't be very long. That was sort of how it started. And then we put together some music and then inevitably had to cut a lot of it down. Cause it's sort of hard to write songs that are less than like 3 minutes long.
Yeah, it can be. Sorry. What kinds of things are you thinking about when you're writing? Like, do you imagine it and then like try to get, or are you just like jamming and get it together? Or do you have a goal that you trying to accomplish and then try to realize it with notes?
Yeah. So I haven't really been doing any of this through notation. I haven't really like notated any of it.
Sure.
Mostly I definitely come at it from like an improviser world, and a lot of what my like process is sort of using the looping stuff that I worked on through dance.
You were doing before the pandemic, you were doing classes, and I at least saw one show where you were using like a looping station and just playing live.
Yeah, so accompanying dance with mostly on cello and a loop setup. So that setup has been very like resourceful, and I've been able to just improvise some things and just make some textures that I feel like were interesting. That's a lot of how I was approaching, or that's a lot of how I do approach my composition, is through improvising with a looper and then figuring it out from there.
Right on. And so this is your first kind of like this past couple of years, your first foray into production, like recording stuff.
Mm-hmm.
How does that change the way you think about it at all?
Yeah, I mean, it's been a challenge to like you come up with something that you psyched about and feels really relevant in the moment because you just improvised it, and then making that then the piece sometimes can really take it out of context, and you can get really precious about it, and that's been a struggle, or an interesting kind of like thing to navigate. I mean, Mark and I have played a lot of improvised music together, and I feel like, similar things come up when you're recording, you're improvising, then it becomes not improvised anymore.
Yeah, I mean,
second time through.
luckily for us though, Rent is who we play with. Rent Ramos is very good about not being super precious in the studio. So
Yeah.
I think he's good about catching raw improvised performances, and I've actually learned quite a bit from that because I'm much more likely to do like 7 different takes of an improvisation, and
Yeah.
and especially if it's over changes. A lot of times with Rent, it's like group improvisations that are free based on some material, not a whole lot, and it's more about energy and just going for it. But I mean, yeah, even that you can be like, can we do that again? But Rent's usually like, nope, next tune.
Yeah.
It's hard in the studio when you're like, that wasn't my best.
Mm-hmm.
And everyone else is like, that felt
was
great.
my best.
Yeah.
Yeah, that balance between, I mean, if you use ambience of improvisation for composition, extrapolating on those and keeping it fun, and not just playing the same little thing over and over again, and actually developing it, that can be tricky,
Mm-hmm.
So
I often think about this thing that you say on the podcast all the time where you're talking about how Miles Davis's B-sides or, his alternate takes or his solos are very similar.
yeah,
I was literally thinking about that for the show last night because I was like going to take a solo on Stuck Backwards, and I was like, I have these kind of licks that I always fall into with that song.
yeah,
And I was like, part of me is like, get away from that. And then another part of me is like, whatever, just play those licks. Like, just do the same thing.
yeah.
Because it's like, it's fine. The way that you develop it is a bigger part of taking a solo than the actual phrases you're using.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, absolutely. And you're gonna develop it because like you're in whatever musical mindset that you are at the time, because you're, everything that you've been practicing and listening to, and all of that will create a unique improvisation every single time. But if you listen over the years, I think that's where it's pretty interesting.
Yeah. Yeah. Right on. Should we check out another one?
Another one. Sure. This one,
Space Horse?
yeah.
Okay.
I started playing a little bit of synthesizer over the last few years as well, and like, learning how to turn those knobs. And yeah, with the arpeggiator and whatnot, and then what you can do in the software to cut stuff out and
you're
sample
using
it.
Ableton for all this stuff, right?
Yeah.
Which is a software that eludes me.
It is a great mystery. I agree.
Yeah. So this one, I was sort of learning how to use the arpeggiator, and then use also the Ableton to sample stuff and cut it all, splicing it all up.
Right on.
Yeah.
Let's check it out.
Nice, man.
Mhm.
Did that come out of working with the loop pedal, or was it? I know the nature of Ableton also can create looping
Ableton
sequences.
loopy.
Yeah, it was mostly experiments with looping and sampling loops on Ableton, and sampling little like the arpeggiator moments.
Mm-hmm.
So it was a journey for sure.
Nice.
And you're
Um,
playing guitar.
Also,
obviously.
that was when I got a guitar. Yeah.
I want to record a morose drum part for this.
Mm-hmm. Morose.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was thinking. I mean, it was just kind of one of those experiments that just carried on, and I thought it was a kind of a funny telephone ring, and then just sort of imagining, yeah, kind of like the secret life of office phones when no one's there.
Speaking, no one's there. Max just unplugged his headphones.
Hello. Oh.
One of my favorite things to do is to make ringtones for people. Just real quick, just like get one MIDI controller and just go for it and be like, here, 20 minutes, and then export it. And then it takes about like 3 days to get it to work on their phone from there. But it's always super worth it. It's really fun.
I want a ringtone.
Yeah, I was. Thanks for bringing that up, because I've been, back when you could make your own ringtones very easily.
Yeah.
And now it's not so easy anymore.
Yeah, last time I did this was for my father-in-law, and we did it when he was in town, and then he was back in New York on Long Island, and we were like on the phone on all these technical calls, like back and forth, basically how to beat the system on an Apple phone, to get your own ringtone to play. And I don't know if you can do it anymore. I mean, I know that you can export things as like the whatever the ringtone extension is, but I don't know. We'll lobby for this, and we'll base all of our voting on this coming up. So
Yeah.
I don't know. Sounds like you're in the pocket of big ringtone.
You should do Sad Fam in January.
Yeah. Well, we were talking about that last night.
Yeah.
And I'm ready for that. Especially because then my racing for the year will be over, and I'll be in one place, and I'm definitely I'll do that. I'm gonna do that this year.
Awesome.
Mm-hmm.
We got one recruit.
Mm-hmm.
I'm gonna do ringtones. I just decided that's gonna be how I can manage it, and maybe they'll be really long, intense, complex,
Really
ringtones,
long ringtones.
yeah, like 8 minutes long with multiple sections that develop. But I'm gonna just say that I'm doing ringtones, and that's how I'll feel okay about the month.
You could like do different, like for the type of phone or type of situation that the phone is in. Like,
Whoa,
you're on a boat ringtone, or like your lost ringtone.
Yeah, I mean, or make ringtones for specific people, right? Because you can designate sounds to happen when certain people call you.
Yeah,
So
this one's for Napoleon.
Mm-hmm.
This one's for Neo.
Napoleon and Neo. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Those two call me all the time.
No, there should be a way to use the phone's always on microphone to use AI to detect the mood of the person who's giving you a call, so that the ringtone alerts you to kind of like what the call is going to be like. Like if someone's really mad, it gives you a very aggressive ringtone.
Yeah.
Right. Be ready.
Oh man, just ready to screen at all times.
What?
Or just immediately, are you okay? Is everything okay? So
Should the question is, should you meet the person with their own energy or provide a contrast?
I guess my instinct there was to meet them with their own energy. I didn't think about, out chippering their bummer. So Devin, you have been thinking about these things. I'm just curious from your perspective, what have you done in terms of distance sports and
Distance sports.
or you've talked a little bit about this, but what got you thinking about this? What kind of training have you done?
Sorry, I bleeped out that for a minute. Is that question for me or for Max?
No, for you. No, that was for you.
Okay.
Because since I'm just curious, like what brings you into this world,
Yeah, when did you first try a triathlon?
How did this come up? It was on Amy's instigation, and I was kind of along for the ride, which is a lot to jump into if you are neither a runner nor a cyclist nor a swimmer. But it's important to provide some context here. So, like, I commute on my bike, but I haven't been involved in any kind of athletics or anything like that. So for me, it's very much like coming into it at a later stage of life. I'm 39, so it's I don't have the pressure of having to execute within a certain age window, which is kind of a different way to approach a sport, but also just not having a lot of experience with the world of athletics. I'd never like entered a race and done it or anything like that. So the process of what's required in the training, particularly for distance events, the amount of training that you have to do is oftentimes correlated to the distance that you're going. So it's a rather large time commitment depending on how far you're going to go. But yeah, the process of the training that's required, the changes mentally that I started to have as I began to do more physical exercise, which is like, Max, you mentioned this, and it's like a very real thing. Your perspective and outlook begins to change in certain ways. And then the process of actually doing a race, like, it's important to note here that I'm not ranked. I'm not in any of the category tiers for triathlon or anything like that. So the racing that I'm doing is very much more low level than like what Max is doing. But just the process of like getting to the point where you're doing the race, it's all of these very different mental environments, and they're mental environments that you're in, and you have to have done a certain amount with your body physically to be there. And the process of doing all that really changed. I found it feeding back into the musical process in these really kind of unexpected ways. Like there's a lot of things both mentally and, for lack of a better word, like spiritually about the process of athletics that changes the execution of the music. And then just like very little stuff, like Max, you were talking about the pedal stroke in the bowing. There's a way that time flows when you're in athletics where like you're in a certain running cadence, foot has to go down, or you're in a swimming cadence where the arm has to go over and you have to breathe in a certain way. And the process of executing that small movement over and over again, I found I became, in a very subtle way, like less hesitant about like putting my hands down on the keys, or on understanding what's required to get through like a mile of distance. Changed the way that I approached like traversing time in a musical sense. What is required to get through this amount of time and the different options you have there. So these were things that, again, not being into athletics until the last couple of years, I just simply never thought about. And like I mentioned, I think this was before we started recording, but there's a lot of writing about this from like writers who are into athletics. But I just wasn't familiar with that many musicians who were actively talking about this beyond there's a lot of good discussion around music and physicality in terms of dance. Again, because it's sort of like the body in motion generally with music. But I just wasn't sure I'd ever heard like a musician talk about, what was required in terms of like weight training, to be, doing like the rings or, like that, the process of the run up to the pole vault and the way that you put the pole down and the way that it flexes. Like, there's all these like really fascinating aspects to athletics that feed into creative practices in different ways. But I just felt like I hadn't really talked to anyone about that in terms of music. And I'm trying to suss this out because I think it's an interesting area.
There's certain instruments. Upright bass is one of them. Congas are another one, where it's like trumpet perhaps, where like if you don't have like a basic physical practice, then you lose your ability to do that thing. Well, like you have to keep up your chops, and the kind of practice that you have to do to keep up your chops is usually like, it's either be like play all the time. That's one way to do it, or like, basic, like for horns, it's just playing long tones, right? And for congas, like you just have to, it's just like this basic, like moving your hands like this and getting the tones out of the drum. That's all you have to do. You have to do it a bunch though, or else you can't play. I don't know what you have to do for bass, but
yeah, well, we were just talking about that too. Like, it's hard to simulate also a performance or like a jam scenario by yourself. And like I've been practicing upright a bunch, over the last few years, but mostly by myself. Yeah. And then when I came up to play a couple months ago, my fingers just got shredded. My pitsing fingers.
We were playing like jazz.
Yeah,
kind
of jazz. But either way, it was just, I felt like my fingers were in shape and I was ready and I was like playing in tune and my instrument was working well and everything. But I couldn't really simulate that environment by myself. I think it's similarly like in athletics as well. It's hard to simulate, a game scenario or a race scenario. It's hard to do that without actually going to that event. But yeah, I mean, staying sharp on your instrument could mean a lot of different things. But I think that you're right. There's some instruments that you really can't play unless you do it often.
Yeah.
Trumpet's crazy too. I've known, I think, at least 3 trumpet players now, who just have to completely relearn how to play at some point in their adult life. They just have to redo their embouchure. Start from scratch, which is insane. You spend all this time learning and like getting all your stuff together, and then you're like, okay, do it again. Do you really want to play trumpet? Try again.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
No, I mean that's but in terms of the body, that's like very real, and you may have done, like, for example, like swimming, you may have like a certain way that you swim just automatically, but then like the conditions can really change that, like not just the distance, but if you switch from pool swimming to open water, there's all these extra things that go into it with dealing with like the chop on the surface or sighting. So in a pool, you've got basically a line on the ground, but when you're in the open water, you have to be looking up more frequently to figure out where the buoys are and that kind of stuff. Or like if you get an injury, like last season, I did something kind of funny to my knee, so I had to like lay off it for like a week and a half. And then when you get back to running, you have to really be cautious about, whatever the injury is, like working with that, like slowing your pace when you're going uphill or something along those lines.
I've been I'm working on putting a team together for a relay triathlon with 2 other musicians and myself.
What distance are you going?
Probably going to be an Olympic triathlon. Just because that's what seems to be accessible.
Yeah.
But one of the people that hopefully will be doing our swim, she does a lot of open water swimming, and is like psyched to do that. And she was like, I asked her, what distance would you be comfortable swimming? And she's like, well, I don't know, maybe like 5K. And I was like, whoa,
That's
super far.
yeah.
And I was like, that's too far. But okay, good. You're ready. You'll be ready. And then
can you because I don't have any perspective on triathlon distances. Can you paint a picture of what's normal and what's extreme?
well, I think there's like 3 sort of flavors of triathlons, right? There's like a sprint triathlon, which is I don't all the way know, and then there's Olympic triathlons, which are longer,
Okay.
and the Ironman triathlons, which are the longest.
And you've done an Ironman, right, Devin?
I did a half. I got a DNF though because I started to tunnel out because it was like high 80s with 90% humidity. Yeah, so the half Ironman is basically I forgot the swim distance exactly, but it's about 45 minutes in the water. The biking distance is around 60 miles, and I did the bike in about 3 hours, and then the running part's about half marathon.
What's the order?
You swim, bike, and run, and if you think about it, it's the only way that really kind of makes sense. But yeah, Olympics are a little bit shorter. Like a fast time for an Olympic is like 2:30. Is if you're cranking, that's kind of what you're going for.
2 hours and 30 minutes.
Yeah. So that's where Amy and I are doing the Morro Bay Olympic on.
So is
early
a
November.
half Ironman longer or shorter than an Olympic?
Longer. For 4:30 or 5, I think is good for a half Ironman. But if you want to do so, an Ironman is double that, and the training required for a full Ironman is you have to be basically like retired or straight up pro. There's just no other way to make the time management work. Even training for a half Ironman is I wasn't doing much else except for doing the training and eating as much as possible and sleeping.
How long did you train for to do that?
I think the training plan that we were on, we used there's something called the Triathlon Training Bible. Max, has this come on your radar yet?
No.
Okay, it's kind of like a meme in the triathlon community. It's just this one book that everybody uses. But I think the run up that we did training wise was maybe 3 months or something like that. But it all depends on kind of like the shape that you're already in. So like, you know, we had to quite a ways to get up to there. But if you're already like cranking pretty hard, Max, you said you're doing it on a relay, so you'll be totally A-okay on the biking stuff.
Yeah, we're ready. The guy who's going to run has run marathons, and the lady who's going to swim can swim 5K, and I can ride all day. So it's mostly just a matter of like getting us all in the same place and figuring out how the logistics work.
What do they play?
Yeah, that was my next question.
So the swimmer is a violinist, and the runner is a keyboard music director.
Okay.
Pianist.
Sweet, man. Well, dang. I think I'm going to start swimming because I don't think lifting weights is going to be a good idea for a long time for me after crushing my hand. And like I'm just doing a bunch of like physical training right now.
Yeah.
And I'm actually like, I got the cast off 1 week ago today. And like, it felt like I went from having like a pretty stable, broken, but not broken wrist to just having a horrible sprain because I hadn't used any of these tendons in a long time. So like I couldn't, but honestly just like really consistent tendon exercises. Like I've made a ton of progress, which is good. And I start physical therapy tomorrow. But all to say, it looks like swimming's back on the menu for me. You know, it seems like that's going to be a really
Swimming's back on the menu, boys.
Sorry, man. Just got the visual of all of them doing laps. The Uruk-hai pool. Yeah. So, and from everything that I've read, it's like, you know, because I really enjoy lifting weights, but I think that I need to get into swimming. And I think that could be really an interesting journey for me, like mentally, in terms of meditation, and just because usually with weights, I'm like blasting music in my AirPods or whatever, you know. So this will be different.
In most of the triathlon events, you're not allowed to have any headphones in, mainly for safety reasons. But that also means you're like alone with your thoughts for hours while you're putting your body through this like intense, often painful experience, which was a real hurdle for me to get over, because I hate being alone with my thoughts. So it's very I mean, it's like super interesting, but swimming is great because there's no you know, unless you get, they have like bone conduction headphones if you need that. But
That's
it's definitely a different mental space to be in, and after having gotten over the hump, it's actually quite interesting mentally to be in those spaces.
Yeah, Crystal, my wife was a competitive swimmer for years and years and years, so she's given me the basic lesson. She's a fantastic swimmist.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, she can swim. And so this summer when we were on Long Island, she would give me a lot of lessons just in laps and form. And I cannot imagine listening to music while trying to focus on that. I would immediately just like inhale tons of water and freak out. Like, it's hard enough, you know?
Are you doing, when you do like a triathlon, is it basically just like what is this called? What stroke is that?
The crawl.
No.
Freestyle. There's actually in the rules, it doesn't really matter which stroke you do as long as you get the distance done, but most people do freestyle just because it's kind of the easiest. If you're in a really long distance, sometimes people flip over and do a backstroke if they need to recover for a couple of minutes. Backstroke is kind of the easiest one if you need to catch your breath or what have you.
Yeah.
I did 2 sprint triathlons when I was in high school, and I wasn't at all prepared for them, and I was like subbing in for someone who couldn't do it, and
oh no.
And it was cool. I mean, I was like grateful for the ticket to do it in their place, but I hadn't trained as a swimmer at all. I ran cross country in high school, so I was felt like pretty capable in the swim or in the bike and the run. But I also remember like going into it being like, all right, I'm just gonna crush the bike. Like that's gonna be the thing. And then I learned later that that's not so much usually the tactic, especially with the longer distance ones, that the bike is more of your recovery nutritional moment. You're like trying to eat a bunch, you're trying to like rest and recover. And then also when you crush on the bike, going and running afterwards is very hard because your legs are just like all like swollen and full of blood. So I learned that way that was not the proper tactic. I also haven't done any triathlon since then, except for this one coming up, but as part of a team.
So you're tell me a little bit about, so you're switching to like track racing. So the form of it, the way that your body is on the bike is I'm guessing radically different from like cyclocross, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's similar. It's a little bit more aggressive on the bike. The positioning is a little more aggressive, meaning like more aerodynamic.
Superman stuff, just like
yeah. It's actually been an interesting, transition because there's so much studies and like research about aerodynamics on the track, and it's not really a factor in cyclocross because we were talking earlier that the speed differential isn't really like enough to make too much of a difference. And with track cycling, it's all about aerodynamics. So people wear those long pointy helmets, and they have like their like aero booties that go over their shoes to make them more aerodynamic and everything. And so that's been an interesting transition. The other thing about track bikes is they're fixed gear bikes, and that, I mean, back to like tempo and RPMs has been also a real revelation for me, because there is no freewheeling, and it's been interesting to listen to music on my trainer, put the track bike on the trainer with music, and matching the RPMs and the BPMs has been a very interesting journey, because because it's fixed, it's very you just either you pedal faster or you pedal slower. There's no like, oh, let me find the right gear for this song.
Yeah.
So it's also been that finding whether you're just whether you're just like deedle 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 deedle, or you're trying to go deedle dee deedle dee deedle dee dee. Whether you're lining up the triplets or the duples, kind of. Or whether your right foot's on the beat or your left foot, whether it's odd or even. That's been interesting. It's also been cool to like just then try to find the BPMs based on the RPMs. So like basically counting for 15 seconds, and then be like, oh wow, this tune's at 91. Sweet. And but like a lot of times I don't listen to music with my metronome and trying to like tap out the tempo. I mean, sometimes I do, but that's not usually how I go about it.
Yeah.
But that's been a cool adventure.
So are you making yourself like BPM centered playlists?
No, but there are such things. But no, I'm mostly just listening to any old thing. And just trying to find what works, but also not necessarily finding the BPMs, but finding like how your cadence might line up with the BPMs. Kind of like over the longer form also.
You're like a DJ.
Kind of like a DJ. Spinning pedals.
So are you do you know in your track trajectory if you're going to be primarily doing solo, or are you going to be with teams, or do you have an idea of like what distances you're going to be shooting for?
Yeah, I mean, mostly what I've been doing recently has been like these mass start races where you race with other people. And there's a lot of tactics involved with that, of fooling around and trickery. That's mostly what I'm interested in doing, because that's just where I'm
tricking people.
Yeah. Sitting in with them and then going really fast when they're least expecting it. Or like breaking away at a time when they just don't think you can make it, but then you're so courageous that you can. That's kind of it. Or getting in a breakaway with people who are strong enough to stay in the breakaway with you, and then you all can work together with those alliances we were talking about.
Yeah.
And working together and saying like, oh, you take this one, I'll take that one, and if we work all together, then you can win and I'll take second.
Are these conversations happening on the bike, like on the track, or is it beforehand?
It's happening during, and oftentimes it's kind of unspoken, which is cool.
Okay, I see.
Where you get to learn about the people that you're racing with, and who's a threat, or who's strong, who's strong, really, Yeah. And if they go off the front and you can bridge with them, then the two of you, or the the two of you can work together. But if there's someone who's not especially strong who goes off the front, there's no sense in going after them because they're never going to make it, and they're not going to be able to help you either. So that you just like let them hang out to dry for a while, and everyone just swarms them.
Crazy.
Yeah, that's actually one of the what's the word for this? This might be a little sadistic, but one of the things I really liked watching in the Tour de France is when you had those breakaways and there was one or two people on their own for like an hour, and then like, you know, the peloton just slowly like envelops them. It's very metal.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to be in those breakaways because you know that you're not going to win. More often than not, you're out there for the TV time, and you're out there to like say hey to your mom on TV at home, and just for the pace of the race. You know that you're not going to actually finish before everyone. You're oftentimes going to finish last.
Yeah, but your mom's on a hike, dude. She's not watching TV.
That's true.
Yeah.
Mom's on a hike, dude.
Don't call home.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
but,
wait, are you like when you're making these little unspoken alliances, are you guys like, oh, let's, you know, do a trick on that person or whatever, you know, or prank or whatever, you put a whoop on their seat?
Well, a lot of times you have to just know. I mean, I'm still pretty new to it, and I'm very like headstrong and don't really get it still. And I have a lot of strength. I'm a very strong cyclist, but I don't have the tactics that is necessary for this and the experience.
Yeah.
And so some of it is like, you really have to find who's the strongest person, and then you're just racing against them. And you have to kind of like, you have to decide who that person is. And then if they go and attack the group, then you go after them. But as far as like instigating anything, if you're not the strongest person, you really have to be racing against the strongest person.
Interesting.
And just watching what they're doing, and not worrying about anyone else. There was a race earlier this summer that I was racing with we were racing a bunch of us, and me and the strongest person there got in a breakaway together, and I didn't know how to handle it at all. I was like, all right, wow, we're here. Look at us. We're doing it, you know? And so I was just like towing him around for a while. But I was trying to recover at the same time because I knew that we were going to eventually sprint it out, you know? And then the group was coming up on us. And then I got really like nervous that then our chances were going to be blown. And so then I went on the attack, and then I got totally blown up, and he won, you know? And I was talking to some other racers who were much more experienced afterwards, and they were like, dude, don't worry about the group, right? You're really just worrying about if that other person that you're racing against isn't worried about the group, then don't worry about it. And you just do what they do, you know? And if you're not the strongest person, you really have to race to that strongest person's ability and really put them on the line.
Wow.
Yeah, so that was like a kind of an interesting experience where I was like, wow, we're really doing it, but I didn't want to get caught, even though we could out-sprint anyone in the group. I was just trying to head-to-head sprint with him, and I didn't even like finish I finished like in the middle of the group somewhere because I got totally fatigued and blown up.
Wow.
Because I went too early.
Crazy.
Yeah. And
how long are those races?
They're quite short. They're like 10 to 20 minutes long.
Oh.
Sometimes a little bit longer, depending. And then some of the individual like time trial events, which I might end up doing eventually. They're ranging from like 500 meters, which is, you know, from a standing start. 500 meters on a bike can take you, I don't even know what the times are, but a minute and a half
Yeah.
or something. And up to, I think the individual events that are really a thing, maybe like 4 kilometers, and the world record just got broken to be under 4 minutes. That's faster than 60K per hour by yourself from a standing start. That's crazy.
That's absurd.
Yeah.
But yeah, some of the time trial event that I think that I might be good at would be like a 2 kilometer time trial. But yeah, mostly what I'm doing on the track is the mass start races. So it's like there's points races, and there's a couple different flavors of those, but where you're racing with other people, and it's all about the tactics and positioning and whoopee cushions.
You're like, hey, the race is over there. You're in the wrong place. I would be good at the pranks, I think.
Mm-hmm.
So I think we have to wrap it up, right? Because Devin has to go. But this has been delightful.
Yeah, this is awesome. Thank you, Devin, and thank you, Max, for guiding us.
Yeah, well, it was awesome to pick your brain about this stuff. It had been an itch back there for many months where I was like, man, I got to talk to this guy about cyclocross.
Yeah.
And music,
Yeah. Well, thanks for having us, and this is a great kickoff to my racing block coming up here.
Yeah.
Racing and shows and everything, and yeah, just really great to chat about it with musicians. Bicycling people they're not good at talking or like being friendly. They're nice. They're nice people. They're nice people.
Too busy playing pranks on each other.
They're too busy on bikes. The gearheads. Yeah.
Well, right on. Thank you all. Appreciate it. Max, where can people find you and watch what's going on with your races and anything such as that? I mean, Devin mentioned Googling you, so that's always an option.
Yeah, the results are online. Some of the events are like streamable. Sometimes. I haven't been keeping up with my social media updates, but I might. But a while back I was trying to fill people in, keep my fans updated, the fan base. But yeah, it's online. A lot of it's online. If you search my name and bike racing, you might be able to find it. Yeah.
Right on.
What about you, Devin? Well, I'll plug devinsmith.work because that's I love Devin's website.
Yeah,
It's
we're
the
just
best. Everyone should go to it.
We do need to have a separate discussion with you about the latest Miracle Cat.
Oh yeah, we'll have you back on soon.
Yeah.
Yeah, that works for me. I'm just going to talk about sports though.
Okay.
The sports correspondent.
Yeah. From here on out, it's just sports, guys.
Well, we'll talk about your music and your work online, and you talk about sports, and that'll be a really interesting podcast.
Yeah.
All right, y'all. We're on Twitter at tones_4, Insta at FT4HB. You can find us on Patreon if you would like to contribute, and we're on Facebook and YouTube. And thank you all for listening, and have a beautiful day.
Chowsers. What track should we go out on here?
Oh. Yeah. I don't know. Try
Don't Be Minor.
yeah. You could try that one if you like. It's from a while ago.
Okay.